Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and of course that means some smart talk radio is in your future once again. And this segment, a very special one. I'm going to be talking to Patrick Robinson. He is recognized as a true authority on the Navy SEALs and Special Forces. He's also the co-author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Lone Survivor. He's also the author of 7 international best-selling suspense thrillers, as well as several nonfiction bestsellers as well. A brand new work called Honor and Betrayal, a very, very interesting, unique story. The untold story of Navy SEALs who grabbed the notorious terrorist Ahmad Hassan al-Asawi. We'll let him, sure I butchered that name, but let Patrick explain more. He also spends part of his life at Cape Cod, Massachusetts, which if you've ever been there, many would think that is heaven on earth in many ways. Patrick, how are you, my friend?
I'm pretty well, thank you, and I'm glad to be talking to you.
Well, I know you've waited your whole life to be on this show, and this is your opportunity.
This is my chance.
Patrick, let's do this. Again, your works are well known, but let's give a little bit more background about you and our Lewis at Large listeners. Military history, stories such as this, why so important to you as an author?
Well, like everyone else, I kind of followed it. I certainly followed when al-Asawi butchered those 4 Americans and burned them alive and dragged them through the streets and hauled them up onto the bridge over the Euphrates for the television cameras, one of the most fiendish acts of murder probably ever seen. I followed that, and I kind of followed the fact that they were never able to find him, and that they kind of manhunted him the American military manhunted him for probably 5 years, and they never found him. And occasionally a story would come out that this maniac, who everyone was so terrified of, was still at large. Then it kind of went quiet, and nobody really knew much. But they had a tip-off, and it was a key tip-off that where he was going to be in an Al-Qaeda stronghold out in the desert, miles from anywhere, heavily protected, but that's where he was going to be. And I didn't know anything about that, neither did anyone else. And a SEAL team was sent in to capture him or kill him. They preferred capture because they wanted him to talk about what he was doing. And this SEAL team went in. I still didn't know anything about it, and neither did anyone else. But as it happened, they caught him. And it was all done pretty quietly. He was pulled in and captured. And to everybody's amazement, including mine, 4 weeks later it came out that the Navy SEALs, who undertook this amazingly courageous mission into the teeth of Al-Qaeda in the middle of the night in the desert, that they were to be court-martialed. And my eyes kind of lit up when I saw this. I was on the front page of the New York Times. And I thought, now, how could that possibly be? American heroes court-martialed by their own side. And I made a few phone calls and checked and found out a few things. And it was pretty obvious that there were a lot of people very angry. Not just me. I was amazed. And I followed it a bit longer, and suddenly on the websites, their petitions were springing up. 350,000 people had joined them to volunteer to help with the defense of these 3 guys who were apparently innocent. Well, they'd have to be innocent. Navy SEALs don't go around whacking terrorists, and he'd claim prisoner abuse, like they all do. I mean, it's just regular stuff. But Navy SEALs don't do that sort of thing. I mean, you know, if they wanted to, they could have blown his brains out, couldn't they? But they didn't. And it quickly became apparent when I read that Congress had filed a letter to the Pentagon or somebody, signed by 45 of their most eminent people, including John Boehner, saying that this was a shocking idea and that America is not going to love it. And at this point, I thought I'd better get in touch with these guys if I can, because this was pretty interesting. And I somehow got in touch with them through the family of one of them. and spoke to them both. And it appeared to me, and obviously to hundreds of thousands of other people, that what was happening was a total disgrace. And I proceeded to follow it. And I stayed in touch with them and went through the heartbreak and the fear and the awfulness with them until finally they were dragged before a Navy court-martial, 3 of them, 2 in Iraq, 1 in America, and unanimously, 3 judges, 3 juries, found them absolutely innocent of anything, which indeed they were. And at the end of it, they said, "We think you ought to do this book." And I'd contributed to their defense and stuff. And I did. And here it is. And it was one of the most outrageous stories I've ever heard in my written.
What?
And here it is, Honor and Betrayal.
Patrick, as you were researching this, you were obviously getting there was support for these people. But take us back to that time. How is the general American media treating this story?
Oh, the American media was absolutely outraged. I mean, there was story after story of how can America accept the word of a known murderer and terrorist against the word of 3 decorated Navy SEALs, supported by 10 other Navy SEALs, who would walk through the witness box in the court-martial, swearing to God they'd been with these 3 guys, and no one had touched anyone. One of them did say, I thought rather colorfully, if Matt McCabe had banged this terrorist in the mouth, he'd still be in intensive care. and everyone was just astounded by this extraordinary trial and the foolishness of the military for going ahead with it. They were being warned on all sides by lawyers, SEALs, people, congressmen, that to do this was insanity and that the American public were going to hate it and the press was going to hate it and they were going to be found not guilty and the military were going to spend millions and nothing good could come of it, and still they went ahead.
You know, again, if you just joined us, you're listening to Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis, as always, from the flight deck here, and we're talking to Patrick Robinson about a very special new work called Honor and Betrayal, behind-the-scenes look at the work of the Navy SEALs, particularly, and the trial that they endured. Patrick, the military, I would think, what makes no sense to me, and made no sense to me at the time, is this was an extraordinary operation carried off successfully. Why would the military suddenly not have these guys back? Why would they not be behind?
They'd come back, but suddenly.
No, but why wouldn't they have them? Why wouldn't they be supportive? That continues to amaze me.
Oh, it was worse than not being supportive. They came after them. This Al-Asawi character said he'd been. It was prisoner abuse. Now, if you look at, which I have, the Al-Qaeda handbook about what to do when an Al-Qaeda man is captured by the Americans, Section 18 says you will immediately claim prisoner abuse. You've been beaten up, attacked, your human rights have been decimated, nothing has gone right for you, and you object to what has happened to you. Now, that SEAL camp was only 12 miles from Abu Ghraib. And the military have never forgotten the humiliation of Abu Ghraib when one guy got 10 years for abusing prisoners. They didn't do anything much. Another got 8 years. A general was reduced to the rank of colonel. I mean, it makes the military really nervous. And here was this character saying prisoner abuse. And they felt obliged to just investigate it and have a look at it. And he said what had happened, and they'd knocked him over, they'd kicked him, they'd beaten him. He hadn't got a mark on him. No one actually seemed to take that into account, except he had a small sore on his lip, which he plainly bit himself, got a bit of blood, got it down his shirt, and said, I've been beaten to hell by these Navy SEALs. It was a total fabrication. And for some reason, the Navy kind of jumped on it too early. They got they ordered all of the SEALs who'd been involved, there were 20 of them, into a room and told them that everyone was being charged, and they cut it down to these three. They said Matt whacked him. Jonathan Keefe lied and said that Matt didn't whack him. And the other man, Gonzalez, he said Matt didn't whack him. So they charged Matt with whacking him, lying, conspiracy, and God knows what else. They charged the other two with covering up the crime, more conspiracy, and God knows what else. And suddenly they took away their weapons, they took away their body armor, they confined them to barracks, they put them in a room that would be expected to be occupied by an Iraqi cleaner or dishwasher. They made them do only menial tasks. They made them sweep, clean the bathrooms, bring people lunch, and all the rest of it. And on one famous night, there was a massive bomb right across the other side of the Euphrates, opposite the camp. I mean, a big bomb, killed 15 people and wounded about 27 others. Knocked down a building. I mean, this was a real attack. And everyone in this place froze in the American base. People were under tables, the ops room was quiet, there were others hiding under decks. I mean, they thought any minute now, this Al-Qaeda army is coming straight through that door. But they didn't come through the door, but the three SEALs did, who had been, living in their little shed. They charged into the door. Matt shouted, "We're under attack. We could all get killed. For God's sake, give us back our weapons." And somebody did and gave them their armor and their weapons. And the three SEALs alone charged up to the roof of this building, facing across the river, not knowing whether they'd run into withering machine gun fire. They got their own machine guns ready. They aimed them across into the smoke and desolation of this police station that had been blown up. And they just stood there armed and said, "Anyone comes across that bridge, he's dead." And it was half an hour before a commander came up, a Navy commander, and they told him what they'd done, and they proposed to stay there for an hour. And expecting someone, maybe several people, to come over that bridge, who they announced they would kill on sight. No one was going to get to their side of the river. And finally, they went back downstairs, and people came out from under the table and thanked them for their courage. They took back their weapons, they took back their body armor, and the officers stowed that away, and they carried on getting everybody's lunch and cleared it up afterwards, which you might think was one of the most disgraceful episodes in the history of war fighting.
Yeah. Patrick, again, this is not your first rodeo writing about the military, but in this particular case, how it was prosecuted, how it played itself out, was this unique, in your opinion, in American military, criminal, or court or justice history, or is this an aberration?
No, I think it's both unique and an aberration. The trouble here is the American military never really make a court-martial public, and they deny all access. You can't find out about it, so we never really know what happened in a court-martial. And this was really tricky for someone trying to write a book on it, because the military destroyed all records of it. I thought when I did it, it would be public record and I could get records of what happened. And they just said they had been destroyed, the men had been found not guilty, and they had decided nothing should be kept, and nothing, in fact, was kept. But what they couldn't really control was the 6 or 7 lawyers who defended these men. I mean, they cost $250,000 in legal fees, and quite a lot of it was paid by the public. And I worked with their lawyers, and there were records kept by them of the interrogation of the prisoner. I mean, the young lawyer from Pittsburgh, Guy Reschenthaler, who's now a judge, actually reduced that terrorist to rubble. I mean, he just made him look like the most scandalous liar who'd ever walked. And one by one, the SEALs came through and said that these three, Matt McCabe, came from Ohio, was the team leader, had walked in front of his column across the desert, not knowing what he was going to run into. Jonathan Keefe, point man, out in front, all by himself, walking with his machine gun, looking in every way, finding the wire, cutting it, getting the guys through, getting them into this apartment where they believed that the man was. And Sam Gonzalez was the lead non-commissioned officer there, senior NCO on the base. And how, and they had been unimaginably brave because they didn't know what they were going to face. And they smashed their way into the apartment, and Matt smashed his way into the bedroom and held his rifle next to the terrorist's face, who was lying down with his hand 4 inches from his own gun. And Matt said, I just remember looking up at the Iraqi and saying to my interpreter, give me the Arabic for make my day, meaning he's going to blow this son of a bitch's head off. But he didn't, because they wanted to interrogate him.
Right.
And Matt got him down and got his knee in his back and cuffed him. He was the most dangerous man ever in the Middle East. He once cut 17 people's heads off and put them in fruit boxes and put them in a market. I mean, we're dealing with a kind of a fiend. And those SEALs got him. Now, and I must say, I do remember saying to them, were you scared of this guy? And Matthew McCabe said, I wasn't scared of the little creep. He said, the only time I was scared was when I saw a charge sheet that said the United States of America versus Matthew McCabe. And Jonathan Keefe, who saw it, said, I had to walk out of my lawyer's office when he showed it to me because I felt physically sick, and I was gone for 20 minutes. And my lawyer later told me he thought I might have killed myself.
Yeah, total betrayal, for sure. Hey, Patrick, take us, if you would, take us behind the scenes of the court-martial itself. What happened there, and talk about the outcome.
Okay, the court-martial, they wouldn't have the terrorists in America, so 2 of the trials took place in Baghdad, and the government actually threatened Jonathan Keefe that they might do it before an Iraqi judge, and if found guilty, go to an Iraqi jail. You know how long he would have lasted there as an American special forces.
Yeah.
They lined up the case. They flew the judge from America. They organized a jury, and the first one to go in was Gonzalez. The defense lawyers had been super. They had really worked at it because these 3 guys didn't get lawyers till very late because they didn't think they needed them. They kept saying, we haven't done anything wrong. If we tell the truth, our commanders will protect us. But of course, their commanders didn't protect them. No one protected them. And it went as high as General Cleveland, who was a very big deal guy in special forces, and he passed it up to General Betrayal. I mean, a phantom punch had actually gone to the head of the American army, which is pretty amazing. And there seemed to be a conspiracy to box these guys into a corner, whether they deserved it or not. For instance, they never had when they were preparing the final days before the trial, they had no copying machine. They were given no paper. And there was a consistent attempt to make them lie, to sink Matt. They wanted to... Jonathan was offered a deal. They'd let him off if he would say he saw Matt whack the terrorist. And Jonathan said, if you think that I am going to betray a fellow SEAL, I should just tell you, I let you cut off my right arm before I would do that. And so it went into court. And one by one, the SEALs came through and said that every one of them was an awesome, potential, big deal SEAL leader. No one had hit the terrorist. That's why he was unmarked. He was a liar, and everyone was astounded that that this had happened to them. The jury threw it out. The judge said that was the correct thing to do. The next one, they went judge alone for Keith. He threw it out. He never even bothered to tell. They never even bothered to tell the jury. He threw it out. Matt's trial, 4 days in the Norfolk yard, and a hard battle. They did everything they could to convince them that Matt had hit someone, which he hadn't. And no one ever took any notice of the fact that they'd said, we'll give you a slap on the wrist if you'll admit you did it, and it'll just be a reduction in pay for a while. And they said, no. We never touched that terrorist. No one did. Everyone knows no one did. We'll go to court-martial. We'll risk jail, but we'll clear our names. And on the 4th day, the jury went out and came back very, very quickly and said, not guilty, exonerated on all counts. And that was the end, except outside in the yard, Matt said, I'm never going to think about this again. I'm just going to live my life, but I will not think of this again. And John Keith, standing next to him, said, no, Matt, of course you won't. That was the end of it.
Patrick, again, there's a lot of lessons here, I think. History can certainly learn from this, but again, from your perspective, knowing these three guys and being way on the inside here, what kind of is the historical takeaway, and do you believe that the American military justice system learned a lesson, so to speak, or was able to look into the mirror and said this was the wrong thing to do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they learned. There will never, ever be another one like this. I mean, this was shocking. I mean, there were stories all over the place saying that the military had gone out of their minds, and that a lot of people in the military, especially in the SEAL community, knew perfectly well that Matt McCabe had not hit the prisoners. SEALs don't do that. I can't imagine any one of them ever going into a holding cell where there was a known terrorist in a hood and handcuffs and whacking him in the mouth. That's kind of silly. The thug. These men are hugely responsible. But the military did learn that neither the press, the legal profession, nor the public will tolerate Navy SEALs, the bravest of the brave, being treated in that way, and they'll never, ever do it again. Of that, I'm certain.
Well, now, my understanding is, Patrick, that two of these guys, McCabe and Jonathan Keith, they are no longer SEALs, but now is Sam Gonzalez still there?
Yeah, Sam is one of those people for whom there was no other life. He was the senior of them, and he was on the verge of a major promotion, which he received. He's Chief Petty Officer. It's not his real name, by the way. We wouldn't print the real name of someone still serving. I mean, it's too dangerous. They should never be revealed exactly who they are. The other two, they couldn't do it anymore. For whatever reason, Jonathan, they both said the same. We were not the same. We just were not like we used to be. We were never striving. Something, a light had died, and they had to leave.
I think that would take it out of you.
Oh, it did. I mean, about 4 of the lawyers left. People were really devastated by these proceedings. I mean, Reschenthaler, the guy who really clobbered the terrorist, I mean, he just left. He did say if it hadn't been for that trial, I should still be in the Navy. I couldn't stay there after that. There were a lot of very serious resignations, and the Navy, I'm sure, would never, ever let that happen again.
Well, it is an important work. It is an extraordinary look at an extraordinary event in American history. The work is called Honor and Betrayal by Patrick Robinson, well-known author on numerous subjects, ranging from American finance to the military. It's published by Da Capo Press. Hey, Patrick, how can people find out more about this really unique story in American military history, and also get a copy of the book as well?
They can get the book anywhere. It's very big in Barnes & Noble. It's very big in Amazon. It's in all bookstores They can look it up on. They can Google it on Betrayal. They can Google Amazon, which would give you big background on the book. They can hit me if they like, patrickrobinson.com. There's quite a lot of stuff about it. But I'll tell you what, it was an eye-opener to write, and it'll be an eye-opener to read. The first account since the Caine Mutiny of a real inside look at a military trial. And the Caine Mutiny was fiction.
Yeah.
I doubt we'll ever get another look at one as closely as this, because there will not be another excuse to get all this from the defense lawyers.
Well, I would assume this screams it's got movie written all over it. And so who are you going to play in the movie?
Who am I going to play?
Yeah.
I think I probably should be a breacher. I'm 5'8.5", and the breacher was 6'5".
All right.
and his profession was to smash in doors with a sledgehammer. That was Jonathan.
Indeed. Hey, listen, thank you so much for enlightening us here and sharing this story, and best of luck to you. What I know you're spending a lot of time talking about this particular work, but what do you have planned for the future?
Well, you know that I wrote Lone Survivor
Yes.
for Marcus Luttrell, and that the movie of that is coming out with Mark Wahlberg playing the lead.
Yeah.
That's shortly coming out. And there was an aspect of that was quite interesting. When Marcus, his life was saved by Mohammed Gulab, who was the tribesman from up there, and up in the Hindu Kush. He saved Marcus's life about 9 times. And Marcus has stayed in touch with him and brought him to America. And he and I are working as a team. I'm going to write it, and Marcus is making it all happen. And it's going to be the tribesman's story of why he saved his enemy in a way that was amazing. I mean, the other Pashtuns detested him for what he'd done. I mean, they've twice blown up his house. They've once blown up his car. He's been shot twice as the man who saved the infidel. And he may come to America, and he has a remarkable story to tell, and Marcus and I thought we might as well tell it.
Well, we will look forward to that. Again, Patrick Robinson, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck to you, and enjoy that wonderful spot you've got in Cape Cod. And I know you're also doing some vacationing now in the Caribbean, so good for you, and enjoy the good life.
Hey, thank you very much indeed.
You bet.
Talk to you soon. Yep. Bye-bye.
We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.
Thanks for being part of the ride for the last 60 minutes. Lewis at Large with Warner Lewis is heard every Sunday from 7 to 8 a.m. Be sure to check us out on the web too at lewisatlarge.com. We also love hearing from you, so send emails to lewisatlargeradio@gmail.com. Lewis at Large is a copyright presentation. All rights reserved.